impulsive kiss still haunts me after my husband caught me with a guy in public. Now he calls me.
Hello, Reddit. I've been a long-time lurker on this app, but I've never posted anything until now. If someone had told me 3 months ago that this would be my life, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have called them a liar. But now, I'm faced with the reality that I've ruined my home and marriage. I'm tired of the way things are between me and my husband, and I desperately want things to go back to how they were before. I want my husband to forgive me and move on, and for things to be just as they were. I'm hoping that by posting here, I'll get some insight and advice on what to do. Any advice you guys can provide me with will be honestly appreciated. What did I do, you might be wondering? Well, I kissed someone else on a night out with my friends, and my husband found out about it. Ever since then, he has not touched me. Here's some backstory. My name is Taylor, and I am a 25-year-old woman. I've been with my husband Eric, who is a 24-year-old man, for about 2 years now. It was a whirlwind romance. We met at a friend's birthday party about 3 years ago, and we were instantly smitten with each other. We exchanged contacts and decided to keep in touch. We went on our first date 2 days after we met at the party, and then in a few weeks we were dating. A few months later, I had moved in with Eric the moment my lease expired. Eric was from a well-to-do family, while I came from a family so poor there were times we had to rely on food stamps. So things were a lot easier for him than they were for me. Barely a year after dating, we got married. Eric's parents paid for the wedding on the basis that I signed a prenup. I didn't mind. I loved Eric, and I agreed. The parents, of course, went with their promise and sponsored the wedding, and it was absolutely perfect. Eric's love language is giving and acts of service, so he loves gifting me stuff, from expensive jewelry to the warmest handmade or thoughtful gifts. Eric really gives it all. He also loves acts of service, like I said earlier, and will give me a massage when he sees that I'm stressed or tired. He will cook and even took on about 90% of the house chores because he loves doing them. Despite that, he pulls in 100% of the income in our household. I've said earlier that Eric is from a wealthy family, so the moment he graduated, his family set him up really well in life. Why am I telling you all this? Just so you understand the perspective and how much freedom I had. Everything was done by Eric, and he did everything willingly, and we both enjoyed it. I'm also telling you this so you understand how much of a mistake I made. So all in all, our marriage was really good. Our sex life was really active. We made sure to go on date nights every Friday, just before the start of the weekend. We didn't have any kids yet, but we definitely wanted some. Our marriage wasn't just a storybook romance. It was real life, messy and beautiful. Eric and I were like two puzzle pieces that just fit together perfectly. We had our share of ups and downs, but we always found our way back to each other, stronger than before. What I loved most about our relationship was how we supported each other. Eric was always there to lift me up, to encourage me to chase my dreams. And I did the same for him, being his rock when things got tough. We had big plans for the future, like starting a family and growing old together. But then, I messed up. I made a mistake that is threatening to tear us apart. And now I'm left wondering if our love is strong enough to survive this. Eric and I were like two sides of a coin, each with our own unique traits that somehow blended perfectly together. Eric was the quiet one, the introvert who found peace in the stillness of our home. He was content with a small circle of friends and found comfort in their familiar company. I, on the other hand, was the social butterfly, always buzzing with energy and seeking out new connections. I thrived on human interaction and loved the lively chatter of gatherings and the warmth of friendship. Despite our differences, our relationship flourished. Eric's calm demeanor balanced out my outgoing nature, and my enthusiasm brought a spark of excitement to his life. That didn't always mean that things were always good between us. Eric didn't like most of my friends, especially the new ones, and he sometimes didn't like it when I went out, especially without him. I wouldn't call him controlling because he wasn't, and I now realize that he had a valid reason for not liking my friends. Eric isn't a social butterfly, like I've said before, so a lot of times I had to go out without him, which he didn't like most times because he liked being near me. 3 weeks back, we went to Eric's sister's wedding. It was not in town, but at a beautiful destination. The whole event was just stunning. I was one of the bridesmaids because Eric's sister and I are really close. The place where the wedding took place was absolutely breathtaking. It had such lovely views and a peaceful vibe that made everything feel magical. The ceremony itself was full of love and happiness, and you could really see how much the couple adored each other. Being part of the wedding was such a special experience. It made me think about love and family, and being there reminded me of the love I shared with Eric, and how important it is to cherish it. The wedding was really nice, like I said before. Everything went smoothly, and it was just beautiful. We had a lot of fun celebrating with Eric's sister and her new husband. When we got back to town about 2 days later, some of our friends invited us out for a night out. Eric and I don't share a lot of the same friends, but we have a few mutual ones who invited us to join them for a few drinks. Eric was feeling pretty tired from all the socializing at the wedding, so he decided to stay home and recharge. He told me I could go if I wanted to, so I decided to go out with our friends without him. He was cool with that and just asked me to text him if I needed a ride home. Since I was planning on drinking, I didn't drive, and my friend picked me up. We went to the pub, and it was a blast. More friends showed up, and we had a great time chatting, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. It was a nice break from the usual routine, and I was getting really glad that I went out. As the drinks kept flowing, we got a bit more adventurous and decided to play spin the bottle. Normally, I wouldn't have gone for it, but my friends convinced me, saying I'd be a killjoy if I didn't join in. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. For a few rounds, the bottle didn't land on me, but then it did, and it landed on one of my guy friends. I hesitated at first, but I didn't want to seem like I was too uptight, so I went ahead with it. I figured everyone else was married too, and they were okay with it, so why shouldn't I be? After my turn, the game started to escalate. My friends began daring each other to do more and more outrageous things, like kissing for longer or doing some pretty suggestive moves. Luckily, the bottle didn't land on me again, so I just sat back and watched the craziness unfold. The night ended with a lot of us feeling pretty wasted, and my friend had to drive me back home. When I got home, my husband seemed a bit surprised at how much I had drunk, but he didn't say much about it. Instead, he made me some tea and then tucked me into bed. The next morning, I woke up feeling a bit hungover, but my husband was there, which was a pleasant thing. He told me he didn't have to go to work that day. He then told me he would make breakfast for me, and I was honestly touched by his thoughtfulness. I stayed in bed for a few more minutes, and I couldn't shake off the events of the previous night. I felt guilty about the kiss during the spin the bottle game. I didn't want to keep secrets from my husband, but at the same time, I felt like it wasn't something I should tell him. It was just a kiss, and it didn't mean anything. Besides, I was drunk too, and it wasn't like I had planned for it to happen. I wrestled with the idea of telling my husband for a while before finally deciding not to. I wanted to put it behind me and move on. I was just thankful that it hadn't gone any further than a kiss. I knew that some of my other married friends had done much worse things while they were drunk, and I was pretty sure they wouldn't tell their partners either. I also made a mental note to not drink as much as I did ever again. The hangover and the guilt were just not worth it. I ate breakfast with my husband, and we cuddled up to watch a movie after the movie was done. My husband decided to go play some video games. I'm not a huge fan of video games, so I usually just let him do his thing. I decided to just go lay in bed and check my phone. I knew a lot of my friends would have texted me, especially since we had such a wild night. I opened up the WhatsApp group chat only to see that one of my less thoughtful friends had recorded everything that happened and uploaded a lengthy video to our group chat. My husband is part of this group chat, even though he's not very active in it because he's more of a quiet person. I was horrified when I opened the chat and saw the video. It showed a close-up of me kissing my friend, and it wasn't just me. There were other friends in the video doing questionable things too. I assume some of my friends thought it would be funny to show us how hungover we were the night before, but it wasn't funny at all. Many of us in the video were furious at the friend who posted it and demanded she delete it immediately. Thankfully, she complied when she realized we didn't find it amusing. I had to send her a voice note explaining that I didn't want my partner to see the video. I thought that was the end of it after she deleted the video from the group chat. I hadn't seen my husband pick up his phone, and I didn't think many people from our group chat were online at that moment, so not many had seen it. However, it turned out that some of our friends, including my husband's best friend who was in the group chat, had seen the video and saved it before it was deleted. After the video incident, things took a turn for the worse. My husband's dumb best friend, who I never really liked, decided it would be a great idea to send the video to my husband. I had no clue about this until my husband stormed into our bedroom, video in hand, ready to confront me. I was shocked. I thought once my friend deleted the video, that would be the end of it. I felt terrible and wished I hadn't gone out that night. I tried explaining to my husband that I was drunk and it was just a silly game, but he wasn't buying it. The more I tried to explain, the more furious he became. My husband looked so furious and deeply hurt. He expressed that this incident reinforced his lack of trust in both me and my friends. He called me stupid for drinking so much and said he didn't know if he could ever forgive me. He expressed disgust at my actions, saying I should have known better. I was devastated. I felt like I had let him down and betrayed his trust. I tried to explain that I was sorry and that it was a mistake, but he wouldn't listen. He was so angry, and his words cut really deep. I couldn't stop crying. I felt so overwhelmed with regret and shame. I honestly couldn't help but feel a surge of anger towards my husband's best friend for sending the video and the friend who had recorded it. They had betrayed my trust and had caused so much pain and damage to my marriage. The whole situation was a literal mess, and I didn't know how we would ever recover from it. After the confrontation, my husband packed a bag and said he needed some time to think. He told me he didn't want to see me right then, and that it would be better if he left. I was at a loss for words. I didn't know how to convince him to stay, so I just nodded in resignation. He left, and I later learned that he had gone to stay at his best friend's house. He ended up staying there for a total of 3 days. During that time, I tried everything I could think of to coax him back home. I sent him numerous messages, but he remained distant. I couldn't bring myself to involve his family in our issues. They were staunchly against divorce, and I knew they would have strong opinions if they found out about the kiss. However, I confided in my elder brother, who I'm extremely close to, and he helped by texting my husband, urging him to come home. After 3 days, Eric finally came back home. He seemed calmer, but there was still a noticeable tension between us. It was clear that the incident had deeply affected our relationship, and it would take time to rebuild the trust that had been broken, but I honestly thought we would weather through it. I noticed that my husband had become really distant. He started sleeping in the guest room, and no matter how hard I tried, he refused to come back into our bedroom. It was like a physical barrier had formed between us, and no amount of pleading or reasoning could bridge the gap. Not only did he physically distance himself, but he also emotionally withdrew. He stopped doing all the little things he used to do before. He no longer offered me massages after a long day. He stopped cooking for me, and he seemed to bury himself in work, taking on even more hours than before. It was heartbreaking to see the man I loved and shared my life with pulling away from me. I felt lost and alone, unsure of how to reach him or how to mend our fractured relationship. His distance only served to deepen the sense of guilt and regret I felt over the events that had led us to this point. I tried so hard to reach out to my husband, to bridge the growing gap between us, but it felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. It was in this moment that I realized just how much my husband had been the one trying in our relationship. He had been the one reaching out to me, doing everything he could to keep our connection strong. I had taken his efforts for granted, never fully appreciating all that he did for me. Now that he had stopped doing the housework and other things he used to do, I realized just how much he had been carrying on his shoulders. It was like he had been the bridge in our relationship, and now that he had refused to play that role anymore, there was a massive, unbridgeable gap between us. I tried to step up and take on more responsibilities around the house, but it was a daunting task. Our house was huge, and the chores seemed never-ending. I tried sleeping in the guest room with him, hoping to show him that I was there for him, but he refused, telling me to go back to my own room. He told me he still wasn't over what I had done and that he needed time and space. But how long would he need? And how could I make things right again? I am consumed with guilt and sorrow, and I am desperate to make amends. I started packing lunches for him and doing other things I had never done before, hoping to show him how sorry I was. But nothing seems to work. And that's why I'm here, Reddit. I've heard this app can be incredibly helpful, and I'm wondering if there's anything I can do to bridge the gap between me and my husband. I'm terrified that things will remain this way forever, and I don't want that. My husband is no longer the thoughtful, loving, quiet man he used to be. He's become cold and distant, and it feels like I'm living with a stranger. It's like he's no longer my husband, but just a roommate I've become acquainted with. It's heartbreaking, and I don't know what to do. I'm scared that if things don't change, we'll just keep growing apart until there's nothing left of our relationship. I want to fix things, to get back to how we used to be, but I don't know where to start. How can I make him see that I'm sorry and that I want to make things right? Any advice would be really appreciated. Update. Hello Reddit, it's been a while. Many of you may remember me as the woman who came here seeking advice because my marriage was falling apart after I kissed someone else while drunk. I honestly didn't think I would be back to update this post, as I posted here in a moment of desperation, seeking guidance. I didn't know what else to do, so I turned to this community. It's been 2 months since I first posted, and I've received numerous messages asking for an update, so here it is. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who offered advice and support. Your words meant a lot to me during a difficult time. Many of you suggested that I talk to my husband, believing that communication would help us work through our issues. So here's the update. For the next few weeks, things remained unchanged. My husband continued to be distant and unresponsive, as if he had erased me from his life. It was heartbreaking to see him change so drastically. I knew something had to be done, so I decided to have a serious conversation with him. I told him that we couldn't go on like this and that I wanted us to work things out. He admitted that he had been struggling with his feelings and wasn't sure if he could ever forgive me. Hearing those words shattered me. I loved him deeply, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. I suggested couples counseling as a last effort to save our marriage. My husband was hesitant at first, as he wasn't keen on therapy, but he agreed to give it a try. However, he also expressed that he felt it might be better for us to divorce. I was devastated by his words, but I couldn't ignore his feelings. I love him too much to force him to stay if he feels it's best to part ways. So I agreed to the divorce on the condition that we first try counseling. He agreed, and we began the process of seeking professional help. However, during this time, he told me that watching the video of me kissing someone else had changed everything for him. It was as if all the love and attraction he had felt for me had disappeared in an instant. He apologized for any pain he had caused me, but he also made it clear that he couldn't forgive me. As much as it hurts, I have to accept his decision. Attending couples counseling was a profound experience for both of us. It opened our eyes to many issues that had been simmering beneath the surface. During our sessions, my husband shared that he had always felt insecure about my social life and the friends I kept. This revelation cut deep because he had never expressed these feelings to me before. If he had, I would have made a concerted effort to address his concerns. However, it seemed that his silence had created a divide that was now difficult to bridge. He also reiterated the impact of watching the video of me kissing someone else. He explained that seeing that moment shattered his image of me and caused him immense pain. He said it was as if a part of his heart had been broken irreparably. Furthermore, my husband expressed feeling like he had always been the one putting in the effort in our relationship. He felt that he was constantly the initiator, the planner, the one driving the relationship forward. He mentioned that he often felt unappreciated and that his love for me was not reciprocated in the same way. Hearing these words was incredibly painful because deep down, I knew they were true. I had taken my husband's efforts for granted, assuming that he enjoyed taking the lead in our relationship. I now realized that my lack of effort and initiative had contributed to the strain between us. I loved my husband deeply, but I had failed to show it in the ways that mattered most to him. I had mistaken his actions as a preference rather than a necessity. It was a harsh reality to confront. I apologized to my husband from the depths of my heart and begged for his forgiveness. I explained to him that I had misunderstood his actions, believing that he enjoyed taking the lead in our relationship. I had assumed that he liked being the initiator and the planner, and as a result, I had not made the effort to reciprocate in the same way. After pouring my heart out and promising to change, my husband thanked me for my efforts. But he made it clear that he couldn't just forget about the kiss. He was still set on getting a divorce. I had hoped that by being sincere and showing him how much I regretted my mistake, he'd reconsider. But he was adamant. I do not know how things will play in court, but I have decided that I will do everything I can to make the divorce process as smooth as possible for him. It's a difficult and painful reality to face, but I have to respect his feelings and choices. My husband has given me a week to leave the house. That is more than enough time for me, and I'm just glad that we are going through everything as amicably as possible. In conclusion, I want to thank everyone who has supported me through this journey. Your kindness and understanding have meant the world to me. I will always cherish the good times I had with my husband and the love we shared. It's a heartbreaking end to our marriage, but I believe it's the right decision for both of us. Also, don't cheat and for your mar.
Hey there, guys. I've been keeping this down for a long time now. It has been almost 10 years since this happened, and I think it's now time I start to tell my story. This might get pretty long because all the events that I'm about to narrate have long occurred, so that means that unlike most of the stories I normally read on this Reddit, there won't be updates. My ex-wife betrayed me and I lost my marbles. Some time ago, I was married to a lady named Caroline. She was a career-driven lady and one of those strong independent women who only cared about her career. She wasn't always like that. I don't know, something about the job she got after we got married made her like that. We got married young, she was 24 and I was 27. We decided to hold off on having kids because we wanted to spend a few years enjoying each other's company. I had suggested it and she agreed because she thought we weren't yet mature enough to handle raising kids. We decided to wait until we were married 5 years. She got that job 2 years into our marriage. I remember her first day at work. She came back so happy and full of immense admiration for her coworkers. She couldn't stop telling me everything she had learned from the first day at the office. What did she tell? Well, let's start from the fact that it was a female-dominated workspace, which I didn't really care much about until she said they wanted to make it a female-only thing, but they needed the men to run the things they couldn't. Things that were heavy-duty. I thought that was weird, seeing her joke about how her coworkers spent most of their lunch break shitting men. I get women empowerment and all, but that seemed to me like taking it too far. Due to that, I started to get a feeling that I wouldn't like her stay at the company. I also knew that it would be almost impossible to persuade her to quit working there, if my fears ever became reality. Though I had my takebacks, I was really happy for her. She finally got to work a job she wanted and had dreamt of. I hated the way she was miserable during the year she worked as a teacher, and I was happy she had gotten something that made her happy to wake up each passing day. The weeks passed, with her getting more enthusiastic about her work life with each passing day. I won't lie, I started to get a little jealous. Not a lot of people were still giggy about working for more than 2 months. There's always the initial, "I love working here" stage, but I didn't always last that long, mine sure didn't. Her joy about work was nice, meant we got to get freaky in the other room often, which was wild. She never had any complaints about her work, except for a few customers being customers, which was something I was happy was going right for her. Now the other thing I didn't like about where she worked started to rear its head. Most of the workers were career-driven feminists who were all single past the age of 35. I felt that at the age of 23, she was way too young and could potentially be malleable or brainwashed into thinking that she made a mistake marrying early. Also, I hoped that she didn't start to model their single lifestyle, because she looked up to a lot of them. Now the funny thing is, the conversations she had with them, at least the ones I knew of, mostly centered around their careers. They also had conversations about other things though, but they mostly spoke about how they wanted to grow their business to the highest of heights. She told me a lot of things about them, how her boss, a 49-year-old woman as of then, always told her her next step was this, or that other one, which were all always something about making more money and becoming the most popular or influential person that bore her name. I don't remember the name, but my ex-wife always said the name with so much respect then. Well, slowly they started to tell her things and she started to listen. She started to want to be like these women, she wanted to become an influential person herself. I tried to talk to her, to tell her that I loved her ambition, but those women weren't women she should aspire to be like. I tried to talk to her, show her more influential women, who were able to make names for themselves while still being in a committed relationship. Funny enough, they always talked her up for being the youngest, but still the only one who was married. There were days when she would come back more excited than normal, because a coworker, one of whom she looked up to, had told her she'd happily swap lives with her. So it seemed they all wanted to get married someday, but one thing that most of the women didn't want was, you guessed, kids. She had started dropping subtle hints that she didn't want kids now. I knew it was because of her work environment. The only people who had kids were the people who did the maintenance, IT and other stuff. The women who worked with the main team, which she was a part of, didn't. At this point, we were drawing closer to the time we gave before we started to try for kids. I paid no mind to whatever hints and signs she dropped and decided that she'd either tell me herself or we move on as planned. After our 5th anniversary, we talked about her going off birth control. She disagreed. I laughed, to be honest, but I didn't find anything funny about her disagreement. She told me a lot of things that her group of undesirables had said to her about having kids, how the only thing the man had to worry about was the initial, which the men liked. Every other thing was on the women. She talked on and on about how she felt bringing a child into the world was only going to slow her pace. At this point, she had already started climbing up the corporate ladder. It was disheartening to see the woman I loved, who was always a mom, who always loved nurturing, who wanted to have kids before we even got married, turn into something like this, something I couldn't explain in just 3 years of working at that place. The bunch of undesirables, as I started calling her coworkers, had indoctrinated her with their undesirable ideas. They had turned my woman into your average deluded feminist. What was worse? She cited the fact that she was the one who earned the bulk of the money we spent and the money we had in our joint account. Low blow that was, if you ask me. We talked about this for several months. She had started telling me the things her mates at the office were telling her, that I was unknowingly becoming a part of the problem, that I couldn't see past my patriarchal instincts which were meant to oppress women. There's no way she thought me wanting kids was oppression, was what I thought. Unknown to me, this woman was already far gone. This conversation went on for a longer period of time than I expected. It took her a few months, but on my birthday, November the 27th, 12 years ago, she brought her birthday gift to me. She had gone off birth control. I was happy, really happy. It was now time for me to make little McLean babies. Unknown to me, that was where the evil deeds started. We tried for 2 years for a baby. At this point, if I was given just one child, I'd have bitten the hand off of whoever offered it. We went to different family clinics, met with different fertility experts, and did tests on each other. Deep down I thought I was being punished for being an absolute player in 7 years from 17 till 24 when I first met Caroline. I had gone to see a neurologist, just to be sure I was even able to get a woman pregnant. She went to see the people she would see to get a fertility test done, or at least that was what she told me. When we got results, we were both really fertile and the specialists only said we should try more so that it would surely happen. Hey, more sex. I'll take what I can get. Over the next 2 years, we still got no results. Then unfortunately, and also fortunately for me, she got involved in an accident, a fatal accident that claimed the lives of several of her coworkers as they went on a convention in another state. I was chilling at home that day. 'Twas a Saturday evening, so I was back home from working. She wasn't home, so everywhere was extremely quiet. I was sitting in the living room doing nothing at all, just sitting. You men know how soul-pleasing a quiet house is. I got a call from a hospital in the state where she was. She was involved in an accident and was one of the few who they got to on time and were saved. I was told she was put on life support but needed to be operated on before the next 3 days, or she might not make it. I rushed down to the hospital with every possible thing that I thought would be needed. It took me till 10 a.m. the next day to get there, but I didn't stop driving until I got to the hospital, driving for more than 12 hours straight. Immediately I got there, I rushed to the where I met my ex-wife. Seeing her in that state, it was pretty hard to contain myself. The thoughts of losing her taunted me. I was scared. I handed whatever documents the hospital needed and they started the surgery. 2 days later she was stable, she could talk and all. I stayed by her side at the hospital all through the days. We were talking and laughing when the doctor came in to check on her, as he did at least once a day. As he made to leave, I asked when she'd be discharged. He responded saying, "Very soon, I just need to prescribe some medication and checkups at the hospital where you live, but before that I'd need to know if there's anything that could affect the medication I'd be prescribing. We don't want to accidentally cripple or even worse, do in a patient we just spent 12 hours in the operating room with." "Anything like what?" Caroline asked. "You know, things like ulcer, pregnancy, diabetes, and aborted pregnancies. Anything that may have not been in the medical history." "No," I responded. "There are no health obstructions." The doctor said okay and headed out of the room. He didn't make it out the door when my ex-wife called him back. "Wait," she said. "There is something." The doctor turned and walked back towards us, asking to hear what it was. She looked at me. I could see in her face that she was afraid to say whatever it was she wanted to say. She hesitated a little, then I nudged her to say what it was. "I had an abortion last week." "Hold on a minute, what?" I didn't even know when I had shouted this out. "Please don't stream the patient, you don't want to risk us having a setback." I controlled myself. The doctor took notes and left. It was now my turn to ask the questions. "What do you mean you had an abortion?" You had an abortion when we were desperately trying to have kids for 2 years? What made you make such a decision without talking to me first? She started crying, saying she never wanted me to find out this way. That wasn't what I asked her. I told her to answer only the questions I asked, nothing more. She started to talk about the years she spent at the company. She talked about the fact that the women she walked with were all against having children, how they didn't want anyone to be dependent on them. She told me how they called children leeches, parasites. She told me how she had told them about our fights, and how one of them suggested she agree with me but get abortions behind my back. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. She said the lady told her that she might only have to do it once and that I might give up after trying for 6 months to a year. I was really disappointed at her. Are these really the people she looked up to? How many? I asked her. She shook her head, saying she didn't want to answer, that I'd leave her if she said how many. I looked at this lady, at this murderer. I asked again, how many? She shook her head, saying, no, 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 no. How many? 7. She said, finally caving. Wow, 7. 7 abortions. All the while she watched me blame myself for us not being able to have kids, and all the while we could have had maybe 2 kids running around the crib. Wow. I walked out of the hospital. As I headed home, I thought about the whole thing. It took me 17 hours to get back home, as I used that time to think about the whole thing. I imagined having 7 children running around my house. I closed all my windows and screamed for a long time, hoping I'd scream away the pain. After successfully giving myself a headache, I calmed down. I decided I needed to get back at her. The only reasonable thing that came to mind was to ruin the career she willingly killed my kids to have. I remembered her telling me once about how the company was evading tax the whole time they existed. She had briefed me on how they did it, and because she was now CFM, Chief Financial Manager, she was actively involved in it all. I knew what I had to do. When I got home, I went straight for her keys and headed to her office. Since the majority of the undesirables were a part of the accident and those who weren't were at the convention, I took my chance. I went for all the files I could find that could serve as tangible proof of their tax evasion, like records of monthly profits, budgets, anything I came across that seemed like evidence, I took. I scanned copies and saved them on my device. Then I called my lawyer, told him how things were. I evenly shared the money in the joint account and I left the house to her. I didn't even know what to do there anymore. Everything in there reminded me of her. By the end of the week, it was all ready. The IRS had been alerted and proof presented to them. The divorce papers were ready. I went out to meet my realtor to find a better place to move into. The time I had spent there was already too much. By the time I had gotten home, Caroline was back from the hospital. She got up and rushed to me when she saw me. I put my hand out at a stop sign. I don't want to hear whatever it is you have to say. The papers on the table are divorce papers. You've been served. Henceforth, we will only be conversing via our lawyers. I said to her. She tried to beg me, tried to explain herself, but I wasn't having it. I went straight to the room, reached for my bag of clean clothes, and headed right out. I only stopped at the door to say these last words to her. Listen, love, you should be ashamed of yourself. You broke my trust and went against nature, all because of your stupid career. Well, I hate to break it to you, but I've alerted the IRS, so I hope your company has made a ton of profit, because you better call Saul. I hope you regret the decision you made, and I hope that whenever you look in the mirror you see yourself for who you really are. A murderer. I left again. This time for good. I slept at my office for a week before I was able to find a new place that was within my price range and mortgage plan. In 2 months our divorce was final. Just a day after we were officially divorced, I heard on the local news radio about an all-female company being busted for tax evasion. Yes. Giving karma time to do its job, do it yourself. I didn't really follow the court proceedings. Hell, I was there only twice, the day I was called on as a witness and the day of the sentencing. The case took 2 years. I dressed in a 2-piece suit, like the meme, dressed for my enemy's downfall. I wanted her to know that I did this to her, and I was there to watch her hopes and dreams burn before her eyes. They took everything from here, even down to the house I left her. The company was shut down completely as they couldn't afford to recount all those years of unpaid taxes, and she, as the manager of finance, and her boss, the COO, were both sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison. As she was escorted out of the court, our eyes met and I had my best evil smile on as I then flipped her off. She bowed her head and I saw a drop of tear fall from her eyes. Look who had the last laugh. Me. I got a call later on, 4 years ago, from an unknown number. It was her. She said she had got out close to 4 months ago and that she wanted to make amends. We met at a KFC on a Saturday evening and talked about everything. She talked about how, when she first started working with the company, she had never seen so many made women in one gathering, how she always thought before then that her biggest achievement was being Mrs. McLean, and how she wanted to be more than just a wife. She said she started seeing a common denominator amongst the women, which was that they were all never married nor did they have kids. She said she thought in order to make it she had to be like them, and that since she was already married the only other thing was to not have children. She saw how they openly condemned having kids and how they said their lives were much better because they didn't have any parasites latching onto them. She said she hated herself for being so naive and impressionable. She didn't have to say it, it was evident in her appearance, posture, and her body. I had noticed some scars and her hands, although she tried to hide them by wearing long sleeves. She said when she got out, she went over to a friend from the office, that what she was when she got there made her hate herself even more. She said the lady was now married with 2 kids aged 4 and 1, and she also had another on the way. She told me that when they had started talking, she had told her how she only remained working there because the pay was good and the benefits even better. The friend of hers told Caroline that she was already engaged to be married and had planned to resign as soon as she got married, until the company was shut down, that is. Caroline went on to talk about what she said was the most painful part of it all. When she asked about the lady who gave her the abortion advice, the lady told her that after the company got shut down by the government she left the country. She said that they had still kept in touch until the lady told her that she was pregnant, aged 41. Caroline told me that her friend from work got angry at the lady who had given the abortion advice, stating that she had given someone advice that helped ruin her marriage only for her to decide she was going to have children, the same children she strongly advised against. She showed me a recording of the words of the lady who gave her the advice. I played it and it went like so, not word for word because it's been a long time, but this was basically what the lady in the recording said. I was really envious of Carl. She was the youngest and still somehow was the one who had life figured out the most. It was a good thing she was such a naive lady. Most of us were miserable. Yes, we were rich, but what good is having all the money in this world if you had no one to share it with? I gave her that advice in hopes that her husband would find out. Not only was she married, but she was married to a literal knight in shining armor. I laughed, to be honest. These were the women she wanted to be like, sad, pathetic, and miserable women. These were the women she betrayed me. I looked at her. She was now like those women, although now she wasn't as rich as they were, she didn't even have anything. I laughed because of how sad it was. She asked about me, how my life was, if I had remarried. I told her that I wasn't. Her eyes lit up for the first time that day. She probably thought we still had a chance. I shut that hope down quickly. Told her I was finally happy, that I had finally moved on. I told her I wished her the best in all her endeavors. I really did. I thought she had suffered enough already. She tried to plead with me to remain in contact, to be friends so we can see where that led. She told me she still loved me. She said she couldn't stop thinking about what I told her that day I left the house. She had started crying at this point. To be fair, she cried a lot during the conversation. I told her to forget about us rekindling what we had, that was never going to happen, that I don't see the woman I loved anymore, and that I had moved on in the time she had spent in jail. I told her I could help her back on her feet. Moving on was hard. Sometimes when I sleep, I dream about those 7 kids, a dream where they had names, a life, and a future. I have 1 child now, adopted. I'm serious about never getting married again. He's a real gem. God gave me the opportunity to choose a child this time and I chose right. His 10th birthday was just yesterday and he was the reason why I decided to tell the world my story. Thank you guys for reading this. I love the life I've built for myself since I left her. I'm happy now, my son makes me happy.